Hey everyone, it's Casey, and today I'm going to talk to you about my middle school reading units. So I'm going to start by just talking about why did I create them in the first place. So after learning about reading workshop at the middle school level and implementing it and really liking it, I loved the concept of reading workshop. I loved the framework that I used in my classroom daily, but where I got stuck is the consistency of it across a school year. It felt like I was kind of randomly picking the mini lessons that I did and not really knowing how to sequence them across the school year, feeling like there wasn't really starting and stopping points. I kind of went from one read aloud to the other, and students were reading books of their choice. I did rounds of guided reading. I did rounds of literature circles. It was good, but I just felt like it wasn't necessarily a deliberate year-long plan. It felt random. I felt like there needed to be some sort of a starting and a stopping point. So once I thought about the idea of reading units and having, the beginning of the unit and an end of the unit, I thought, this is definitely more what I would want to do. Where if we were doing a reading unit on like a certain theme or a certain genre, and we started it and the read aloud connected to what the students were reading, whether it be with that theme or the genre, and we had a stopping point, and then we could maybe move into a writing unit after that, or if I just taught reading, we could do another reading unit. So I just love the idea of having this starting and stopping point and being able to do multiple units across the year. Also, the idea of genre. I think that students get really stuck in one specific genre, and I never want to damper like their independent reading choice, so they can choose that same genre all year for their independent reading if they want to. But what I do like to do is making sure my read alouds, like I'm not always reading realistic fiction because that's my favorite genre. So having different units based on different genres across the year, I think is the way to go, because it lets students explore those different genres. And I actually was very surprised once I started teaching different genres that I like a lot more reading genres than I thought I did. And I enjoyed teaching genres that I never thought I would. And then the next part is I didn't want to keep doing the same reading mini lessons over and over again. Kind of felt like I was just pulling out of thin air, and that it always came down to the same reading mini lessons on, connecting and finding theme and finding a symbol and summarizing, and just kind of seemed like we always did the same mini lessons, and they're just kind of in random orders, or maybe I did like a series where we did like 10 mini lessons in a row on summarizing or something. And I just didn't like how it sequenced out across the year. And then the last piece is I struggled with what to actually put in the grade book while teaching reading. No, writing is pretty straightforward. Students produce a piece of writing that we can grade with a rubric. But for reading, like, what does that look like? Do you grade guided reading discussions? Do you grade comprehension checks on books? Like, what do you actually put in the grade book to show who students are as readers? And so based on all these types of frustrations that I had, where I knew reading workshop was good, but I also knew it could be better, that's where the reading units came about, and I tried to solve the things that were frustrating me. So the reading units can be used with any book, short stories, or texts in a variety of instructional contexts. So what I mean by that is, if you purchase like a realistic fiction reading unit, there's not a certain book that you have to do the read aloud with, or that students have to read to go along with that unit. It can be any realistic fiction book. As far as the instructional context part goes, the reading units can work with teachers who want to do anything from whole class novels to having an interactive read aloud with students doing some kind of a small group reading alongside that, such as guided reading literature circles or reading strategy groups. It can also work really good for a teacher who wants to do a read aloud and then have students read independently a book of their choice in that genre. So it can work with any scenario that I just mentioned there. So the basics about the reading units, each unit is focused in on a different reading genre. So it's either nonfiction based or literature based. The literature based reading units are realistic fiction, historical fiction, science fiction, and / fantasy, and then also fairy tale and myth inspired fiction is the last one. For the nonfiction reading units, there is one that's expository nonfiction, and it focuses in on nonfiction short articles. There's also one on memoir and biography, and the last one is a narrative nonfiction. So those are the 7 reading units in total. Each reading unit contains 20 unique reading mini lessons, and the units are intended to last 4 to 5 weeks with about 45 to 60 minutes of daily instruction. And I know from talking to language arts teachers across the United States and beyond that middle school, it's very interesting how different schools put different emphasis on the amount of time we have to teach reading to students. So I know that you may have more time than that or less time than that, and you can adjust to make it work for your time schedule. Each mini lesson includes a formative assessment, which I will show you in a second here. And then the reading workshop format stays the same each day, but the mini lesson concept changes. So I'll just pull up the reading workshop format to show you what that looks like here. So daily, we've got a mini lesson. There's an oral reading fluency piece put in there where students are reading aloud to a partner, and they're rereading part of their independent reading that they've already read. They're reading 1 page aloud a day. There is an interactive read aloud element where the teacher is reading a book in that genre aloud to students. And then the mini lesson concept for that day follows through into the modeling, the have a go, where students are taking on that reading mini lesson by doing some partner work or maybe getting started with the application. The application is going to be where students are applying that reading mini lesson to the book that they are independently reading. That's also when, if you wanted to do small group instruction or if you want to do reading conferences, that would occur during this time. And then students would come back at the end to share out what they did as readers for that day. So this structure stays the same daily, but the mini lesson, the standard you're focusing on each day changes. I found that students really love the consistency of a daily framework. And then the last thing about the reading units, the 7 reading units in total, 4 literature-based, 3 nonfiction-based, are designed as a year-long reading curriculum. So you can be confident that you are having students have a plan for the year. You're not just randomly doing a reading workshop with whatever reading mini lesson sounds good at the time. You are actually going in with a plan for how you want to have the year look. And depending on, once again, how much time you have with students, and if you're in charge of teaching reading and writing or just reading, it will depend on how many of those units make sense for you to do across the year as well. So next up, let's start with a reading unit plan and go ahead and take a look at that. So in the reading unit plan, which I'm going to bring up here, you can see that we have, this is the historical fiction reading unit plan. So each different reading unit obviously has its own plan, but there is the sequence included along the side so you can see which mini lesson to start with, which mini lesson to end with, and then what priority reading standard, it's Common Core aligned, that mini lesson aligns to. And then you obviously can see what the mini lesson statement for that day is as well. You can see that some have a star that says summative assessment on it. That just shows that those specific reading mini lessons are on the final reading unit summative assessment. So those are ones that would be important to grade and give students feedback on. So that is what kind of the whole unit is based off of, is the unit plan. Let me just make sure. Okay, so with the unit plan, you saw that there's about 6 reading priority standards. So it's standards 1 through 6 for literature and reading standards 1 through 6 for nonfiction informational text. And those are highlighted 2 to 3 times across each reading unit. The standards spiral within each unit and throughout all of the units. So what I mean by that is that each unit, it's not like you're just going to do like standard 1 3 times in a row and then a standard 2 3 times in a row. Like they're spiraling within the units and then also across the units. What I really love about that is prior to reading units, I might have spent 10 days on teaching students how to summarize. And then I never really like came back to those mini lessons again across the year. Well, students should be working on summarizing not just during one book. Students need to be applying these reading skills to different genres and different texts across the year. Just because they're able to find a theme in a book in a genre that they're really comfortable with, doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to transfer into a book or genre that they're not as comfortable with. So we need to make sure they're able to transfer those reading skills to different texts and different genres. And also with the unit plans, there's different formats of the unit plan included. So there's like a student unit plan where students keep track of their days and check off the mini lessons as they go through, and also keep track of like their proficiency levels on the formative assessment as they go through. There's a teacher unit plan where there's space for you to plan out your read aloud alongside the mini lessons, and also to just plan out the dates that you're going to do each mini lesson. There's also a unit understanding included with each lesson where you can kind of come back to that it's like the theme of the unit. You come back to it again and again and keep that at the center. And as I mentioned, there is a summative assessment at the end of the unit. I'm going to show you really quickly an example of a unit wall. So this also comes with the resource. So you can print out the base of readers, and then you can take the action verb from each of the reading mini lesson statements, and you can put it around the circle and then finish with the mini lesson statements on the outside. I also have the unit understanding up at the top. And then what is also really cool is you can take students' formative assessments, like really good examples of formative assessments, and you can put them alongside even further along the circle. And I found that to be a really powerful visual for students and motivating for students as well. So then what is included within each reading mini lesson? Just keep in mind that each reading mini lesson is unique to that unit. So a mini lesson does not ever repeat across the units. There's 140 unique reading mini lessons across the 7 units in this reading curriculum. So each mini lesson is fully scripted for the teacher, and I'll give you an example in a second. Includes a reference sheet and an anchor chart, a presentation, a formative assessment in the form of an exit ticket, a proficiency rubric, a modeling example of the exit ticket, a screencast video lesson for students. So this could be used if you're doing a flipped classroom for distance learning, like if you teach lesson and then also want to have the video of the screencast of that lesson is kind of like a second view for students or for students who are absent. A lot of different ways that you could use that. And then all of the mini lesson materials come in editable and digital Google Drive files, and those are included with the reading units. So let's take a look at what each reading mini lesson looks like. This is really, the biggest part of what the reading units are made up of. So the 20 mini lessons each contain a mini lesson, basically script for the teacher, where it has the mini lesson statement, the teaching point. It references, what the student reference sheet or class anchor chart is, and then a student connection question you can ask. It has directions for the oral reading fluency, where students are reading aloud to a partner, focused question connected to that mini lesson for the day. Ideas for stopping points in the interactive read aloud. So there's different ways that you can have students stop and different prompts that you could ask them. So you could pick a few out to use throughout the read aloud for that day. Idea for how you can model that reading mini lesson, how you can release that gradual release of responsibility, and then what the application/formative assessment is for the day. So once you're done with the mini lesson, students go to their independent reading, and there's an exit ticket that is directly related to the mini lesson for that day that students can work on as they read. And then there's also questions that you can use for reading conferences or small reading strategy groups that are, once again, specific to that mini lesson for that day that you can ask students. And then there's a shared question at the end. So this mini lesson script is really nice just to give teachers ideas of what they can ask, what they can say. So much of reading is asking those questions and getting students to think, and sometimes having those questions all set to go can really deepen the experience and take a lot of pressure off the teacher as well. So that's the mini lesson. And then each one also contains a reference sheet. So this reference sheet, you could print this out and have students keep them in a binder or a folder. You could have them cut them out and glue them into a reader's notebook. You could project it during the lesson. You wouldn't have to give a copy to each student, or this can be also made into an anchor chart. So this is kind of the reading strategy summarized for students. So in this case, with the mini lesson being readers explain how the author organized the book by chunks of time, chapters, and or parts so they can consider the impact of the organization on how they experience the book. So this anchor chart is how do authors organize books? And it gives different ideas of how authors organize books, kind of defines each different type. Then the next piece is each mini lesson includes a presentation. So there's a PowerPoint, there's also a PDF form of this, and there's also a Google Drive, Google Slides form of this. So it breaks it down so that you can have one slide projected at a time. I love doing this because I feel like it keeps me on track as a teacher, and it also gives students that visual of where we are, especially once they get to know the reading workshop format. Oh, we're on the modeling right now, or oh, it's application time right now. And it just really centers that for teachers and for students. So I'm just going to scroll through this so you can see what each slide looks like in that presentation. And then after the presentation, each mini lesson contains an exit ticket. The exit ticket is designed for that mini lesson, and it's designed to assess students on if they're able to apply that mini lesson concept to their independent reading. I said one of my biggest frustrations was like knowing, are students getting this? Is this meaningful to them? How do I record grades in the gradebook for this? And I think these formative assessments really do solve all of that. You don't have to use the formative assessment every day. You don't have to grade every single one that students do. But there is a proficiency rubric that comes with each formative assessment as well, that's designed specifically for defining proficiency for that exit ticket. So you can just see like on here, what it would look like to meet proficiency, approach proficiency, what a minimal proficiency or shows no evidence would look like for this specific exit ticket. And so what's nice about these proficiency rubrics is they're also great student self-assessment tools, or even they could switch with a partner and do a peer assessment, because I don't think it's important that you grade every single one of these. And then it also comes with a modeling example where I took popular middle school books in that genre. So this is the historical fiction one I'm using as an example. So I was using Paper Hearts as an example, and I filled it out in relation to that so that you can show students, this is what a meets proficiency would look like for this exit ticket. I've always found that students do better when you actually show them what the expectations are versus tell them. So that is what is included with each reading mini lesson. There's also a lot of reading unit materials for English language arts teachers embedded right in this resource. Spent a ton of time trying to make this where it wasn't just about, the student materials, which are great to have, but it also provides teachers with the background, the understanding, the supports, the materials that they need in order to successfully teach this way with the reading units in that reading workshop format. So there's an interactive read aloud instruction guide, a reading conference guide. I mentioned that each mini lesson comes with like 5 to 7 specific questions that you can ask related to that reading mini lesson for the day. There's different anecdotal notes pages so that you can keep track of how students are doing if you choose to do that. There's also a data tracking sheet where you can keep track of students' proficiency levels on those exit tickets across the unit. There's a before the unit planning checklist to help make sure you have everything in place and ready to go before you start teaching the unit. There's a small group reading instruction guide, and then there's a ton of resources for guided reading, literature circles, and reading strategy groups. So I just screenshotted, this is the literature circles folder. So I have, how do you plan for literature circles? This is like a template for where you can put in the choices that students can have for literature circles. Discussion points students can use, a calendar that you can fill in so students can have a calendar of what page they should read to and when, literature circle discussion point ideas, group norms for literature circles, a sheet that students can prepare for literature circle preparation, literature circles rubric, a student bookmark for literature circles, a self and peer evaluation for literature circles. So if you choose to do the format where you're doing an interactive read aloud with students, and then students are doing some kind of a small group instruction, whether that be literature circles, guided reading or reading strategy groups, these resources are for those. So I have it for literature circles, for guided reading. And with the guided reading, one thing that I spent a ton of time with each reading mini lesson is I did questions for all the different, so for like summarizing, connecting, inferring, predicting, I had specific questions that you can ask in a guided reading lesson pertaining to that genre. And then I also have reading strategy groups, which I'm really excited about. If you haven't heard or done reading strategy groups, I think they're pretty awesome. They're a teacher facilitated group, but you don't have to do a ton of prep in order to do them. It's kind of like a reading conference for a small group of students and having a really good conversation with them and being able to enhance the mini lesson for that day. So if you've not tried them, everything that you need to do them here. I included some reviews on what people are saying about the reading mini or the reading unit so far. So this one is from Sarah, and she said, "We have been using this resource now for a week and it is absolutely wonderful. It gives you in detail what you should be teaching and when, and some ideas on how to do it. It helps you with whole group and small group instruction. This resource takes the guesswork out of everything for ELA for me and is helping me know what I'm supposed to be doing and how to do it." So I thought that was awesome. And then this one's from Callie, and she said, "I just spent some time digging into this resource and I'm blown away. I easily outlined how to use it next school year if we are teaching in person, using distance learning, or using a blended model. All of the resources included make it so user-friendly and flexible for many teaching situations. I'm able to implement it without buying additional novels, as Casey gives and explains several options for novel choices. Most of my thoughts about next school year are full of anxiety and unpreparedness, but this resource is truly a bright light. Thank you so much. I look forward to using the whole series." Audrey says, "I am floored by how detailed this unit is. I love that there's introduction, guided practice, and independent practice for every day, along with linked Common Core standards. This did so much of the work for me. Seriously, thank you." And finally, Shannon says, "I have never seen or downloaded such a well laid out, thorough, and engaging resource. This has cut my planning time hugely and has made me rethink my literacy block. Cannot wait for the rest of these units to be finished. I'll be the first in line." So I'm not really super good at like saying that, hey, my stuff is awesome, but I will tell you this, that I have had, 13 years of experience in the classroom and as a literacy coach, seen a lot of different ways that students can be taught. I tried reading workshop in so many different ways and tweaked the model so many different times to do what I think is best for students. And I really do believe that I took everything I learned along the way and used it to pour my heart and soul into these reading units. It's been a total dream of mine to make a reading curriculum for middle school students where teachers can actually be successful with a reading workshop format, but they can also be intentional with a reading workshop format. So I'm going to be putting the links to the reading units in the description to this video, and I really hope that you will go check them out. You can also go visit my website, theliteracyeffect.com, and you can go ahead and go to the reading tab on my website and download a free reading mini lesson in order to just kind of, once again, see a little bit deeper on if that format would work for you in your classroom. You can also visit my store on Teachers Pay Teachers, bit.ly/KCTPT, You can head there if you'd like and just check out the reading units and read the reviews on there. So I think that is about all I wanted to tell with the reading units, but please let me know if you have questions, if I can answer any for you, or if you want to talk further. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.